First of all, we've seen you a lot in Virginia.
Right.
This past presidential election, and we've seen you in Virginia in the past, campaigning for various Democrats running for office, including Senator Tim Kaine. We haven't seen you with Terry McAuliffe just yet, will we?
Well, as you've noticed, there's a lot of stuff going on around here, trying to make sure that we reopen the government and make sure America pays its bills. But as you might expect, I strongly support Terry McAuliffe. I think he's going to be a terrific governor for Virginia, and as soon as we get this out of the way, I think you'll see a whole bunch of folks campaigning actively to make sure Mr. McAuliffe becomes the next governor.
There is so much at stake with this shutdown, particularly in Virginia, where we have so many federal workers.
Right.
How do you see, or what do you see as the biggest impact to Virginia, to the Commonwealth right now?
Well, as you mentioned, there are just a lot of folks who work for the federal government. And one of the most frustrating things I've seen in the political rhetoric, not just over the last few weeks, but over the last few years, is people denigrating federal workers. These are the folks who help veterans get their benefits, help to keep us safe, help to keep our water clean, help to make sure that small businesses are getting loans. They work really hard. They don't deserve what's happening right now with this government shutdown. And so right off the bat, you've got hundreds of thousands of people across the country who aren't sure about their paychecks. That also has an economic impact. It means that the restaurants in Virginia, maybe they're not getting as many customers because some of those federal workers are worried and holding back on spending. It means that businesses who provide services to the federal government, they're not getting paid, and so that may have an impact on their payroll. So the ripple effects from this across the board are particularly damaging for this area and for Virginia. And that's why what I've said repeatedly is this is completely unnecessary. The reason we're where we are right now is because Speaker Boehner, the House Republicans, thought that they could get leverage in budget negotiations or defund the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, by taking us to the brink and essentially trying to hold the entire U.S. economy hostage. And what I've said is, I'm happy to negotiate, and Democrats have shown themselves happy to negotiate on any issue, but you can't threaten to shut down the government as a means of getting leverage in negotiations. You've got to take that off the table, and I think most people understand that.
The House Majority Leader said to us earlier this morning that he wants you to come to Capitol Hill. He wants to sit down. He wants to negotiate, and he says it is your inability to do that has caused this shutdown in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think anybody who's been following this understands that I meet and talk with John Boehner all the time, and we're prepared to negotiate on anything. I've said that publicly repeatedly. I saw him just last week, talked to him just yesterday. The issue's not whether or not we can negotiate. The problem here is that in a normal negotiation, there are things I think are really important to help us grow the economy. Making sure our infrastructure, our roads and bridges are rebuilt, making sure that early childhood education is funded so that young people have a chance to get ahead. And John Boehner has other priorities. And in a normal negotiation, you'd sit there and you'd say, okay, this is what you want, this is what I want. Nobody's going to get 100% of what they want. What Mr. Boehner's essentially said is, unless I get what I want completely, then I'm not going to reopen the government. Well, I don't understand, and I don't think most Americans understand, why do you need to shut down the government in order to have a negotiation? That doesn't make sense, I think, to most people. If most folks have an experience, let's say you're selling your house and the buyer offers you one price and you're offering to sell it for another, and the buyer says, well, unless you take my price, I'm going to burn down your house. I don't think people would call that a negotiation. They'd say that doesn't make any sense. And what we need to do right now is don't harm the American people. Put folks back to work, reopen the government, make sure America's paying its bills, and we're then in a position where we can have a good negotiation about how we move this country forward. I'm eager to do that, and I've been prepared to do that. I've been asking the Speaker to do that for the last year.
The sticking point here is health care reform,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of concern. And you met with Virginia workers back in 2009 when you were campaigning, and you said too many Virginia families are being crushed by health care premiums. And you also said Virginians, if they like their health care plan, they could keep that plan.
Yeah.
But we've seen since the passage of the Affordable Care Act, premiums have increased. Employers like the University of Virginia have dropped spousal support from health care. We've seen companies like Home Depot, community colleges have taken full-time staff and made them part-time instead.
Yeah, well,
were these anticipated consequences?
You know, I have to say, though, a lot of this stuff has been happening for the last several years. That doesn't have to do with the Affordable Care Act. In fact, premiums, for example, over the last 3 years have gone up at a slower rate than any time in the last 50 years. So the problem that we've had for a long time is that employers have found healthcare costs really burdensome. They've been loading off costs onto workers for a very long time. The only thing the Affordable Care Act has done is to create a marketplace, essentially a group plan, a pool for people who don't have employer-based health care. And what it's done is it said, you can now go and buy health care that is competitive, that gives you choices, and if you still can't afford it, then we're going to provide you a tax credit to help you buy it. And you know, what we've already seen are thousands of people in Virginia who are currently benefiting, who are getting health insurance for the first time. And you know, what we've also seen is that the system is beginning to get more efficient. But that doesn't mean that we're out of the woods. A lot of people are still hurting because their premiums are going up, employers are shifting costs onto them, and that's why we've got to make sure that we keep on working to improve the healthcare system as we go along. But that's not because of the Affordable Care Act.
There's a few questions from our viewers that they wanted me to ask you. Jennifer Moore writes, why fine people for not having health care when in reality, if we could afford it, we would have it in the first place?
Well, this is what's called the individual mandate. And here's the problem. If you don't have health care, but you get sick, then you go to the emergency room, and those costs get shifted onto people who do have health insurance, who purchased health insurance. In fact, the average family probably pays an extra $1,000 in premiums every year in hidden subsidies for people who haven't bought health care. So what we've said is, we're going to make health care more affordable. Through the Affordable Care Act, you'll be able to get a really good health care plan for less than your cell phone bill, right? So a lot of people say they can't afford it, but they've got a cell phone bill and they've got a cable bill. This is for less than a cell phone bill, they can get that health insurance. If you still can't afford it, we'll provide you with tax credits to buy it. And if you still can't afford it after that, we'll give you a hardship waiver because you've shown, you know what, I still can't afford it. But if you can afford it, then what you can't do is not buy health insurance and then have other people subsidize it. The other part of this that's important is that unless you have everybody as part of a plan who are purchasing health insurance, you can't guarantee people with pre-existing conditions that they can get health insurance. And one of the most important things about the Affordable Care Act is we now have a guarantee that even if you've been sick before, even if you've had breast cancer before, even if you've had some kind of illness before and you're healthy now, you are still able to buy health insurance. That insurer cannot deny you, and you're basically charged the same as everybody else. But the only way you can do that is to make sure that everybody's actually getting health insurance. So that's a very popular thing. Everybody thinks that you shouldn't be barred from getting health insurance because of a pre-existing condition. You can't do that unless you make sure that everybody is doing their responsibilities as well.
My time is up. Would I be able to ask you what my
Of
son
course.
wanted me to? My third grade son and his class want to know, why can't you initiate some sort of kids' voting rights to head off some of these issues?
Well, I have no doubt that kids have some better sense than some adults. You know, some of the things you learn in the sandbox about sharing and cooperation and not throwing tantrums, I think probably would serve us well here in Washington. So tell your son that I'm going to take his suggestion very seriously.
All right, thank you,
All right,
Mr. President.
you bet.